Hello, my name is Andrea Taroni. I am the chief editor of Nature Physics, and today I'm going to describe a little bit of what we do inside Nature when it comes to open access. The structure of my talk is as follows. First, I'll provide a brief introduction to the Nature portfolio. I will then jump into the meat of the talk, which is really our initiatives surrounding open access and how we are engaging with this issue at Nature. And then I'll have a section focusing on a pilot that I've been working on and we've been working on as a portfolio called Guided Open Access. And then I say question and answers here. Of course, I am not personally able to be here. I'm asleep right now whilst you're listening to this. But I believe my colleagues will be available for any questions and answers at the end of my talk. Okay, so the Nature portfolio, it all begins really with Nature, the sort of flagship magazine. Before jumping into that, I just want to stress that actually the history of publishing, really, at least scientific publishing, really begins in the 17th century. And there is a sort of long and distinguished tradition of journals which are still published today that have been launched over really the centuries. But Nature was first published in 1869, just nearly 152 years ago. And the thing I want to emphasize is our original mission. We published this in our first issue, and it's informed everything that we still do today. And that is to place before the general public the result of scientific discovery and to help scientists to learn about advances in all branches of natural knowledge. So really, it's a twofold mission. On the one hand, we want to enable them to talk to each other. This is what all journals do. But also, and I think this is a key distinguishing feature, we also want to celebrate these great works of science so that they can be appreciated by a broad audience. This might be, you might find analogies with a magazine about architecture, celebrating great architecture, or a magazine about cars, celebrating great cars. So there's an element of, we also want to sort of really put science on the agenda with the wider public. Very briefly, because I'm going to describe a bit more about the Nature portfolio and all of these journals separately or later, but the majority of the Nature portfolio is actually open access, by volume, I mean. Of course, our flagship journal, Nature, and Nature Research journals have until very recently been subscription journals, but this year we have made them transformative journals. I will describe a bit later what this means. But in practice, it means they offer an open access option, and they're committed to increasing the proportion of content that they publish open access over time. We also have a number of journals which publish secondary literature in the form of reviews and protocols. These are subscription. I will not sort of focus on them today. And then our open access journals, of course, are spearheaded by the flagship open access journal, Nature Communications. We've recently launched a family of journals called the Communications Journals. That's, for example, Communications Biology or Communications Physics. We have a range of journals that are being launched in partnership with institutes around the world called the Nature Partner Journals, or NPJs. And we have scientific reports, which is really dedicated to publishing robust research without putting an emphasis on issues to do with novelty and things like that. What the Nature journals do? I would say the best way to think of us is as a giant filter. And my analogy here that I've made is, the process of making wine. You might think of your own preferred fermentation process, but to put it in very, very simple terms, we receive a lot of submissions. Let's imagine over the course of a month or so at Nature Physics, we receive 100 submissions. Of these, we will read all of them, but we will only select for peer review a small proportion, depending on the field and the editor and, a bunch of factors. This is roughly 10 to 15%. And of these papers, about half end up being published on our either in print and on our platform. And that's sort of the amplification part. So to give you some more concrete numbers around this, these numbers pertain to 2019. I can assure you they've actually grown significantly in 2020 because we received a spike of submissions during the pandemic. And it only pertains to I think Nature and Nature research journals. But over the course of 2019, we received just short of 57,000 submissions. We sent out for review about 10,000 of them, and we ended up publishing 4,500. So these are sort of the headline numbers for all of Nature and the Nature research journals. Of course, for all the papers that we don't publish, we do try to provide authors with a way forward, an option to sort of maybe publish in another outlet in the portfolio. I won't dwell on this too much today, but it's this is just to give you an idea of the scale and of the numbers that we're talking about. When it comes to enhancing, well, this can mean many different things, but a concrete example that I have here is what our art editors do. On the bottom left-hand corner, you will see a sketch submitted by the author as part of their submission. And on the top right-hand corner, you will see sort of the results of the art editor's work in the published paper, which of course is clear. It articulates the concepts in a way which is, aligned with what the author had in mind, but also makes it sort of, just look a lot better. We do things like this for every single paper that we publish. So this, again, is something that we pay very close attention to. And finally, what I mean by amplification, I'd just like to stress a little bit that the papers, once they're published on nature.com, they really, it's a platform with a global impact. And that means that papers published on Nature, will receive greater attention from the media. They tend to receive more citations from fellow scientists, and naturally they tend to receive a lot more downloads than sort of the average paper published in an average journal. So this again, it speaks to our mission to make sure that our research is sort of appreciated by the broadest possible audience, but we really deliver on this. All of this is possible because we have a large in-house dedicated team of editors that are focused on making sure they can publish the best possible science. So Nature and Nature research journals as a whole have something like 200 I think last year we were about 280 highly qualified sort of professional editors, all of whom have sort of experience in research. We have PhDs, we've have our own research track records, and as editors we're immersed in the field. We follow it closely, we attend conferences, we have our finger on the pulse, and we are really committed to making sure that we champion our fields in our respective journals. We also have 50 or so art production and copy editing staff. These are the people that do the sorts of work that I described earlier when it comes to the figures, when it comes to unpacking the English. This is a very important part of what we do. And we also have 38 editorial assistants who sort of provide us with really the clerical support, without whom really nothing would really work at Nature. So they're very important. And finally, we have 3 press officers who ensure that once our research is published, it reaches the right journalists and the right venues to sort of make sure that it really does have the widest possible impact. All of this requires a great deal of investment. We believe that the work that we do is valuable, and we think we have our track record demonstrates this. Right, so open access. The first thing I just want to describe a bit is the history of what we now call the Nature portfolio. The portfolio as a whole is sort of really dedicating to advancing knowledge and addressing some of the greatest challenges that we face as a society today. Our journals publish not just primary research, but also reviews, critical comment, news, and analysis. And ultimately, if your work is scientifically robust, we will find a home for it in one of our journals. Of course, if you will, our history all begins with the launch of Nature in 1869. I'll just briefly mention that actually the peer review process that is the bedrock of everything that we do was only really formalized in the late 60s. And you can sort of track that as a result of really the invention of the internet. You can see that that's when the growth of journals really started to sort of begin for us. So we launched Nature Genetics, the first research journal, in 1992, followed by other research journals over time. We launched the review series in 2000. But since 2010, there's really been an emphasis on open access. So Nature Communications was launched as a hybrid journal, but it became fully open access in 2016. Its launch was closely followed by that of Scientific Reports, by that of the Nature Partner journals, and by the Communications journals. And so, this is just to illustrate that as the portfolio has developed, open access has become an important part of it. If we just take a step back a second and speak from the perspective of Spring and Nature, there is much more to Spring and Nature than just Nature. We also publish other imprints such as BMC or Springer. And actually, through these, we have really quite a lot of experience of publishing in the open access space. And I think, firstly, I think we're one of the largest publishers in open access by volume, but it also speaks to our commitment to open access. Having said this, there are unique challenges to making Nature open access because, as I've just described, we're both editorially intensive and highly selective journals. And because we have a very large readership, it's essentially been easier for us historically to spread the cost of this over the very many readers that we have compared to the comparatively few authors that we have. Having said this, we, nevertheless believe that it's possible to make Nature open access, and in fact, it's desirable because this is consistent with our original mission of sort of, celebrating research and making it as widely accessible as possible. In this regard, we've done a fair amount of work. For example, Nature Communications has been fully open access since 2016. And has really been a very big success as a highly selective open access journal. And as I will describe now, Nature and the Nature research journals now also offer an open access option. The way we do this is through a framework of the framework of the transformative journals. And so this basically means that when an author submits to Nature and the paper is eventually accepted for publication, they can choose whether they want to make it open access or not. If they are published open access, they will be compliant with all open access funder mandates. Of course, the editorial criteria and the service that we provide as a result of the two models is completely indistinguishable. The open access option, of course, is only available for the journals that publish primary research, not the reviews journals. A little bit more detail on what a transformative journal is. What it is a journal which is committed to transitioning to fully open access by gradually increasing the share of content that it publishes open access, and by offsetting this against the subscription income in such a way that we avoid what's known as double dipping. So as part of this, sort of a corollary of this, is that we actively promote open access benefits. We are open about the metrics and the reporting. So in terms of, we will basically report back to the community about the volume of papers that we publish open access. We're transparent about our article processing charges, and we're transparent about our subscription prices. So that's a transformative journal. And okay, that means that now authors, when they submit to Nature and the Nature research journals, they have a number of options available to make their research open access. The first is direct, which is what I've just described, that of the transformative journal route. The article processing charge for this is 9.5 thousand euros. I want to stress that this is so that authors can comply with funder mandates, for example, from Plan S. If authors cannot afford this APC, there are other options. So we have a separate portfolio of fully open access journals. And also, we can still offer to consider papers under the regular subscription service, if you will. We also are working on what are known as transformative agreements. So far, the only one I think which also covers the Nature is the one that's been reached with the Max Planck Open Science Open Access Agreement, known as the deal. This means that authors based in Max Planck Institutes in Germany, if they have their paper accepted in Nature, it is automatically made OA with an effective APC of 9.5 thousand euros. However, because there is a sort of an automated system to make sure this happens, it is, of course, less bureaucratically cumbersome for those authors. Finally, and I'd like to spend a bit of time describing this, we are experimenting with a pilot known as Guided Open Access. We're piloting this on 6 titles, which includes Nature Physics, Nature Genetics, Nature Methods, Nature Communications, Communications Physics, and Communications Biology. And in a nutshell, from a publishing perspective, the idea here is to spread the cost of submissions across more titles, emphasize a little bit more the service element of what we do, and basically we split the APC in 2 installments. So one, which is paid as an editorial assessment charge after the first round of peer review, and the second installment, which is paid if the paper is accepted in the journal. I'll describe this in more detail now. Okay, so the editorial idea behind Guided Open Access is that it's designed to make the process of publishing simpler, quicker, and more efficient for authors. So in some sense, I will speak thinking about physics because that's my background and that's what's more comfortable for me to do. But you can imagine everything I say to also hold true for Nature Methods and for Nature Genetics. But when you submit through Guided Open Access in the physics stream, you're submitting simultaneously to Nature Physics, Nature Communications, and Communications Physics. We will sort of assign you one editor, an editorial guide, that will essentially do everything that they can to make sure that they find the suitable home for your paper. A centerpiece of Guided Open Access is what's known as the editorial assessment report that we compile following peer review. And as I say, we effectively split the cost of the editorial evaluation from the cost of the publication. And ultimately, as I'll describe later, when it comes to Nature Physics, it's an opportunity to publish open access in a Nature journal for a reduced cost. What I mean by efficiency, I think this sort of illustration describes it quite clearly. On the left-hand side, you'll see what I refer to as our business as usual submission stream. So you can imagine the author in blue comes to me at Nature Physics. I maybe take a week or so with my team to make a decision. I will then sort of reply to you saying, sorry, we can't publish it. So a week has passed. You then resubmit to Nature Communications. They take a week to reject your paper. You submit again to Communications Physics, and they decide to send the paper out for review. This process, even though your paper hasn't yet actually been reviewed, takes potentially up to 3 weeks. This is just illustrative example. But typically it takes something like a week to reject a paper. So if you're being rejected by 3 journals in a row, it will add up to 3 weeks. Under Guided Open Access, we effectively hook you up with an editor ourselves. So you submit once. We will talk to each other in a collaborative fashion across the entire physics stream of Nature Physics, Nature Communications, Communications Physics, and then send the paper out for review. That means there has to be an element of trust that we will hook you up with the right editor, the right journal. But the advantage is that we will send you out for review if the paper is suitable for the pilot a lot quicker. As I've mentioned, the editorial assessment report is a big part of Guided Open Access and is what you get after the first round of review. This provides authors with an editorial evaluation, help to navigate and interpret the feedback of the reviewers by sort of emphasizing the parts of the reports that we think require the most attention. We provide guidance for adhering to best practice on openness, transparency, and reproducibility. We will then provide a clear recommendation for a suitable output of publication. So we will tell you, we think your paper has what it takes to be published in Nature Communications, and we'll give you advice on the next steps, for the work that you need to do in order to achieve that goal. The other thing worth mentioning is that we also are happy to enable the portability of the reports, and if the reviewers agree, their identities with other publishers. So you can take all of this information and take it to another publisher should you wish to do so. A little bit more detail of the editorial assessment report. On the right-hand side, you'll see that there's, we provide sort of clear indication of whether the journal, the paper is suitable for Nature Genetics, Nature Communications, and in this case, Communications Biology, and the level of revisions that are required in order to achieve that goal. So it might be that Nature Genetics is out of reach, but Nature Communications, in order to publish there, you need to do another set of experiments. However, maybe if you want to publish quickly, Communications Biology can overlook that issue and simply, ask you to maybe tone down your claims a little bit. So there's a range of possibilities, and we can do this in a much more efficient fashion rather than submitting to 3 separate journals. The other thing which I should stress is we have an open research evaluation part, which promotes what are the so-called FAIR principles for data and code. We help authors sort of adhere to sort of ethical standards in the life sciences in particular, and we essentially really go out of our way to ensure that the reproducibility of the work is really maximized by the time it is published. I should also explain the cost structure of guided open access, because I think that's probably something that you're interested in. How should I do this? So essentially, as I've said before, the main thing to remember about guided open access is that it splits the cost between the editorial assessment charge, which is 2,190 euros, and a top-up article processing charge that is payable if the paper is accepted for publication. Now, the editorial assessment charge is the same as in all, regardless of the tier of journal the paper is being considered at. So it is always 2,190 euros. However, depending on the journal that your paper is published in, the top-up fee might change. So the top-up fee for Nature Physics, for example, is 2,600 euros. Top-up fee for Nature Communications is 2,600 euros as well. And the top-up fee for communications journals is 800. The flip side of this is that this means the total APC for Nature Physics is 4,790 euros, which is the same as for Nature Communications, and is 2,990 euros for the communications journals. Now, if we compare this to the cost of direct open access, had you gone through sort of the direct route, there's a big saving in the for Nature Physics. The comparison is 4,790 versus 9,500 euros. The cost is slightly more. Should go back. Slightly more for Nature Communications and communication journals, because we believe that this is reflected in the all the advice that is contained in the editorial assessment report. But this is basically the costs, and I'm sure my colleagues can give you more information on this if you ask on the day. Unfortunately, I can't give you too much in the way of quantitative information with regards to how the pilot is going. We launched it in January, and it is still actually very early days. The thing I want to stress is that we are receiving submissions in all 3 streams: the physics stream, the method stream, and the genetics stream. And authors are paying the editorial assessment charge. We are very carefully collecting author feedback, both after they submit and sort of are sent out for review, and after they receive the editorial assessment report. I think we've sent something like 20 or so in these past few months. That should give you an idea of the volumes that we're talking about. So it's still very small, but we're monitoring a bunch of KPIs very closely for this pilot, because it's very important to us to get it right. I'd also emphasize a little bit of positive feedback we received from funders. This is publicly available information on the Nature homepage, but for example, Bodo Stern from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, well, his quote is, "We're very pleased to see Springer Nature is actively exploring innovative solutions towards open access and peer review, which are urgently needed. We're interested to see how guided OA develops." And similarly, I won't read this whole long quote from Robert Kiley, the open research, the head of open research at the Wellcome Trust, but his take on guided open access is the pilot of a new publishing model where the total article processing charges are split between an editorial assessment fee and, if accepted for publication, a publication fee, is one we will watch with interest. Ultimately, we believe that publishing costs need to be split so that they will reflect the different services publishers provide. And this experiment by Nature will help inform this approach. And so, it's not just for ourselves that we're doing this. In some sense, we do think that the level of demand that we will see for guided open access will inform the wider community approach to developments such as this. Okay, so to conclude, sort of the three take-home messages for me today are Springer Nature is committed to open access, and as part of this, Nature and the Nature research journals are now offering an open access option through the Transformative Journal option. And we're committed to increasing the share of open access content that we publish over time. 6 journals in particular, including Nature Physics and Nature Genetics and Nature Methods, are trialing the guided open access pilot. I will give you a little bit of resource and information here if you'd like to follow up on this. And I think I will end there. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much. Bye.